god of mischief, and self-proclaimed true king of Asgard, Loki, is a turret-based strategist in Marvel Rivals. Loki's a character that places down immovable turrets that replicate his damage output and healing, allowing him to be multiple places at once and confuse enemies with multiple clones. He is a high skill cap character that is very complicated to be able to play at its maximum, but also just really effective, with some of the highest healing output per second that you can get in the game. He's a very complicated character because he requires you to know how the kits of every other character in the game works to play him at his peak effectiveness. So we're going to go over the details of his kit and then talk about how to play him and how to utilize him as best you can in the game. If at any point you find this guide useful, hit that like button. And if you want to see more guides, don't forget to hit subscribe. Mystical Missile is his basic attack. This is a 12 ammunition attack that shoots out a moderate speed projectile which explodes on contact. The projectile and the explosion will both deal damage to enemies and heal allies. Pretty much everything you're doing as Loki is using this basic ability. You're going to be spamming it out at players, hitting as many allies as enemies as possible to split up that damage. When you hit a target, the explosion radius does still damage and heal nearby enemies and allies. So it's very rewarding to hit packs of people with multiple hits. Now the core to his gameplay is his clones, and he has two different ways to get them out. First up is his alternate fire, Deception. Activating this will make you go invisible and leave behind a clone. As long as you never fire, your invisibility from Deception is infinite, and you have increased movement speed. You're able to quickly move around the battlefield, and enemies can only hear your footsteps, they're not actually able to see you. This can allow you some great ways to move around, get set up, and surprise enemies, popping up behind them with multiple clones, and unleashing multiple shots into their backs, taking them out rather quickly. It's also a really good escape option. If you notice that an enemy has figured out where you're at and is coming in towards you, you can quickly activate Deception and sneak away. Though try not to move too predictably, moving in a direction that the enemies are going to be ready for is quickly going to get you found. If you take any damage while you're invisible, you're going to pop back to being visible and be easy to be taken out. Also, at any point that you activate any of your abilities, your invisibility will end. The clone will replicate all of the attacks that you do and will shoot them into the direction of wherever your cursor is pointing, relative to the position of the current clone. Having one of these clones out is going to double your damage and healing output, but it's also going to give another target for enemies to hit. Now your clones cannot move, and enemies are going to be able to take them down rather easily if they focus in on them. So advanced Loki play is to pretend that you yourself are one of your clones and to stay stationary similar to the clones, making it so it's less likely the enemy team knows which Loki is actually you. Unlike other characters, it's very common and effective to just stand still and spam attacks as Loki. Your second way to get a clone out is your E ability, Doppelganger. Activating this, your cursor will change to a diamond crystal. You can place this crystal up to 30 meters away from you to put down one of your doppelgangers. This ability has two charges, so you can store up two separate doppelgangers to be able to put out, and I always recommend having one of them available to you so you can use it for emergency situations. Early on in your Loki career, you're going to be dropping these pretty close to where you want to hold, and you're just going to set up a turret line of effective damage and healing and spamming down corridors at the enemy team. As you get more and more advanced with Loki, you're going to start finding angles and options to be able to drop these clones that's harder for your enemy team to find. Having interesting clones up at high angles or off around corners can make it so you can apply damage and healing from areas that enemies aren't ready for, and make it so that enemies are not able to really track where you're at. Your F ability, Devious Exchange, gives you an even more slipperiness. When you activate this ability while pointing at one of your clones, you will snap your finger and teleport to that clone's location, and that clone will appear where you were. This can get you some great ways to move around the map. Popping in a clone at a high location and then teleporting yourself up is a great way to get better angles, but also you can use this if enemies have gotten on top of you to quickly snap and be a long distance away. A quick snap over to a clone and then Deception to go invisible and sneak away is a great escape mechanism and highly effective at getting away from enemies. If you aren't currently targeting one of your clones, it's going to pick one of your clones at random within range to teleport to. This can be used as a snap decision to quickly move if you get surprised and aren't able to get yourself to safety effectively with any of your other abilities. But it should be used sparingly because it will teleport you uncontrollably and you're not going to guaranteed go to the clone that you want to go to. This can also be activated while invisible and it will not break your invisibility. Loki does have a special melee backstab ability. When he uses his melee key, V by default on PC, and the right analog stick down on controller, you're going to stab out with a dagger in front of you. This does a minor amount of damage to targets in front of you, but does double the damage if you manage to land it as a backstab. Your clones will also replicate this, so if you manage to get directly behind a target and spawn a clone, you can do a decent chunk of damage with backstabs, landing with both your attack and your clone stab. While I don't really recommend using his melee attack too often, it is occasionally useful, and there's even an achievement for taking out a target with it. The most important part of Loki's kit, and what makes him an extremely powerful healer, is his left shift ability, Regeneration Domain. When you activate this, you're going to put down a green circle below yourself, and a rune will appear above it. Any allies within the green area will receive massive healing, and will convert all damage taken into healing. This will negate so much damage from the enemy team and heal up allies extremely quickly. It's got a rather long cooldown, but it also applies the circle at each of your different clones that you have in the fight. So if you have both your clones out and yourself, and you activate this ability, you're going to get 3 pools of healing. This will negate the damage of so many ultimates, as well as turn around massive damage from enemy teams. Quickly healing your allies with this is a very potent ability, and one of the main ways that Loki keeps himself safe. If an enemy diver has gotten on top of you, the first option is to drop down your rune, giving yourself basically invincibility from their damage, and then quickly shoot them down with your clones and multiple projectiles, wiping them out quickly. Or if your allied tanks have charged into the enemy team and are taking a massive amount of damage, a quick rune drop onto them is going to quickly heal them up and negate all that incoming attacks. Then spam your damage into the enemy team with all of your clones and do huge damage and burst healing. One of the best reasons to always have a doppelganger clone available is for this ability. If you need to quickly react to an ally that's in trouble and need to give them unlimited healing, you're going to want to have a doppelganger to quickly be able to drop on top of them and then drop the healing sphere. Tracking when this is available and knowing when to use it is some of the most important parts to playing Loki. If you manage to get really good at placement of these fields, you're going to become an absolute force. God of Mischief is his ultimate ability. You can only activate this when pointing at another player, and when doing so, you're going to transform into that character. For 15 seconds, you become that character and gain all of their abilities, and your HP gets reset to their maximum HP level. You get to act as that character for that duration, but you cannot cancel this ability. Once you've transformed, you're stuck as that character for the full duration. So you want to make sure that you're using this on an ideal target, that you're going to fully utilize their kit, and you're not going to leave your team at a disadvantage. While copying another player, you also get access to their ultimate ability. And when you activate this, it extends the duration of your ultimate by another 15 seconds. So you can spend up to a total of about 29 seconds as the target, because you need about a second between transformation and being able to activate the ultimate. Timing this and knowing who to transform is extremely important, and really the thing that makes Loki the most complicated. When you're starting off as Loki, chances are you're best targeting just one of the other strategists, transforming into them and getting the ability to use their healing effects, and then activate their ultimate ability to heal your team with the massive amounts of healing that each of the different support ultimates do. Most of the time, this is a perfectly good use of his ultimate, and he charges his ultimate up rather quickly, so you can get some of the early healing ultimates that usually take quite a bit of time to build up a lot earlier in the game. If you're constantly using your double clone spam, you should quickly charge up your ultimate and be able to get advantage of a healer ultimate really early on. However, as you get a lot better at the game and at Loki himself, you're going to find yourself using a wider range of different ultimates, and you're going to want to try and take advantage of multiple different characters as you're playing Loki. A thing to note is that this needs to be planned. His ultimate is not really a reactionary healing ultimate like those of other strategists, so if your ally team is suddenly in trouble, it's very unlikely that you're going to successfully be able to turn, copy the right target, and activate their ultimate to be able to help you in that situation. You need to be prepping ahead of time, knowing where your ultimate target is at, and then knowing how to utilize their specific ability set to help you in this situation. This is again where Loki can just become a little bit more complicated than the average character. Planning your positioning, your clone positioning, how to move about, and who to ultimate all comes into play to play Loki at his top level. Let's talk about how to utilize him in the game. Starting off in matches, you're going to want a quick spot to be able to put down one of your clones at default. You want a good angle slightly off from your current position that's not going to be easy for enemies to be able to take out, but will have a good vantage point on where your allied team is trying to be. You want to make sure that enemies that want to deal with it have to get themselves out of a defensive position to be able to stop your clone. Otherwise, they have to allow the amount of damage and healing that your clone produces to go through, and that's your ideal state. Hitting targets with multiple shots all the time is going to leave you at your most effective, and you want to be nurturing and placing your clones correctly so that enemies aren't able to quickly wipe them out. After your first clone is set, you're going to want to use your deception to drop a second clone closer to where you're planning to hang out. You want 2 reliable shots coming from a single direction, and to split yourself off from that secondary clone just by enough that if enemies start to shoot at one or the other, you have the option to switch to the opposite if they manage to target you. With your proper clone setup, you're now going to be unleashing the attacks. You want to be shooting at the bulk of the enemy and allied team. Wherever the ball of vanguards and melee attackers are at, you want to be spamming your shots into that cluster. The massive amount of damage and healing that you do should easily top off your vanguards and put a lot of strain on the enemy strategists, keeping their vanguards alive. If you start to feel the sway of battle move towards your enemy's favor and your tanks are about to die, drop a clone and a rune amongst your allies to quickly turn the tables of the fight. Then continue spamming into the enemy team, shredding through their HP. You need to pay attention to your clones. Looking at the left side of your screen, you can see the current HP of both of your clones, and you should know how many clones you have on your field and how healthy your clones are at. If clones are starting to take damage, you might want to drop a new one in a new safe spot, moving it away from enemies and making it so you can continue doing your damage. Loki is definitely one of the strategists where him dishing out damage into the enemy team is very important, and you need to be utilizing your damage and healing at the same time onto as many targets as you can. It's very rare that a Loki will end a game with some of the really high healing numbers that you might see from something like a Cloak and Dagger, because he's actually putting a lot more pressure on the enemy team and making fights end a lot sooner. Also, all healing that's done by his runes does not count as healing if the target's at maximum health. So there's a lot of damage that you end up negating that doesn't get shown in the stat line, but really made the difference in the fight and made it more likely that your team won. The fact that your clones will drop runes is also a really powerful thing to think about if you get killed. When you've respawned in base, if one of your clones is still active and you can see that a fight is still going on with your team, you can drop your left shift rune ability from base and your clone will drop that rune at its current location. This can give your allies an option to get into to get quite a bit of healing even though you're nowhere nearby. Then just start spamming your shots with your clone, making sure that shots are just firing off as you run back to your allies. Allies can jump in the way of these shots to receive healing, and you might be able to turn the tables of a fight without actually being present. Loki's an extremely ineffective healer if he doesn't have any of his clones out on the field, and you need to be ready and prepared for that if enemies are really good at taking out your clone allies. You need to then pace your abilities and try and make sure that you always have a clone ready and available to drop so you can continue to dish out what you need to do. As enemies take out your clones, drop another new clone at a faraway position from the previous and make it harder and harder for them to always take out one of your duplicates. If you're fighting a team that's really effective at taking out your clones, you don't want to be constantly dropping all your clones out because they'll quickly wipe them up and it'll be quite a long cooldown before you're able to drop another clone and your effectiveness will be at a really low level. As Loki would, always have multiple escape plans ready. You should have an idea of what route you can take if you want to go invisible and sneak yourself away from any aggressors, while also knowing where you have clones that are in a safe spot that you can quickly snap yourself to get away from enemies. Be unpredictable and don't always use the same method. You don't want enemies to get comfortable with your movement plans, and you want to make sure that they're always on their toes, not sure where Loki's at or what you're currently doing. And to fully master this character, continue to find new and interesting ways to use your rune to stop your enemy team. Negating Scarlet Witch or Iron Man ultimates by just dropping a rune on your allies is really potent, but it can also be really strong to just be using your rune on cooldown, constantly allowing your team to have extra pressure on the enemies, negating their damage output. The maximum effectiveness of your rune is really going to depend on what ultimates your enemy team is using and how you're going to use your rune to counteract them. If you're really on the push with your allied team, pushing onto an objective, spamming clones forward into your allied team, shooting at enemies, and dropping runes allows you to give a lot of pressure pushing forward. You don't always need your clones to last forever, and sometimes having a short duration clone that just applied the right amount of pressure at the right moment is way more impactful. If your clones are just with you way in the back, spamming damage outwards, it's not going to be as noticeable to the enemy team as if one of your clones is right up in their face, blasting damage into them, and dropping a rune on themselves, stopping their damage output from taking them out. You should be as focused on damage as you are on healing when you're playing Loki, and making sure to take advantage of the fact that your shots deal huge bursts of damage on low HP targets. With this guide, you have a better understanding of how to play Loki in your games, and you start to master the God of Mischief. In the next video, we'll talk about a brand new hero coming to the game. But we'll go into details about that next time.
Sazaze.